Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar hosted by the Organization Development and Change Workforce Education and Development Program at the Pennsylvania State University. This is a monthly webinar series presented during our lunch hour, and those webinars are free. My name is Marcia Ruimel, and I'm a PhD student in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State. I will be your moderating today alongside my colleagues Halima Hatta, who is also a PhD student in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Pennsylvania State University, and Nadia Waterton, a marketing specialist at the Pennsylvania State University. For the interactive format of this webinar, please use the chat feature in Zoom. If you have any questions about the presentation, please let us know in the chat. You can see the chat button at the bottom of the screen. The Q&A session will be at the end of our presentation. Our online Master of Professional Studies is designed to equip professionals to lead change in their organizations effectively. Change is designed for professionals who need the skills and knowledge to lead change in their organizations effectively. Furthermore, there are master's and PhD programs in workforce education and development with concentrations in human resource development and organization development. Our program has created a continuous free monthly webinar series featuring experts from around the world. Dr. Jamieson, our presenter for today, is the president of the Jamieson Consultancy Group and professor at the University of St. Thomas. With nearly 6 decades in organization development and change, he is recognized for his work in strategy, organization design, culture change, transformation, leadership development, coaching, and teaching. He is a leading scholar at the use of self as a core organization development competency and has authored 9 books and 17 handbook chapters. Dr. Jamieson has received multiple professional honors and currently serves as editor of the OD Review, associate editor of the Journal of Management Inquiry, and a member of the review board of the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science. His career is profiled in the Palgrave Handbook of Organizational Change Thinkers. For more information about Dr. Jamison's bio, please visit our webinars page on Eventbrite. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker today, Dr. Jamison. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. You're very, very kind. And I wish my mother and father were still alive so they could hear me be introduced once in a while because they never thought I was going to go anywhere and make it work. So that was a long time ago, but I really appreciate your work. So let me tell you a little bit about. I'm really happy to do this because it's the latest thinking. While the pandemic was going on and stuff, I've had a lot less work and I've had way more time to think. And I really want to talk a little bit about this 21st century of changes that we have, which is very different than it was when I was out in the field for almost 50 years. And and I've been thinking a lot about the differences between where we are in our OD professional and how well people know about OD, but also what is so different in the environment and the context that we now work in, and what is it we can do, and how I'm thinking about ways that we can do our work even better. I want to just talk a little bit about a couple of things here, and that is I want to talk about our changed environment and the work world we're in and how different it seems to be today. And I'll stop for a moment and ask some of you to maybe say some things that you see in your world in terms of what has changed the world we work in. The issues that have faced the field of OD, I will give you some of mine. I love OD and I've been in it for a long time, but I don't think we've made a good job of having a professional um, a professional area that everybody understands and that have a good reputation. We should be in the same boat as medicine is and lawyers are and other people are. And there's some issues that have faced us during our last 80 years or so in OD. And we need to work with what I call the core essence of OD. And that's what I've spent more time on lately, is trying to figure out what it is and simplify how we design and execute change. And then at the end we'll have hopefully some questions and some comments if you have things to say. So let's start here with what our changed environment and work world. Over the last couple decades, here's what I think we've experienced. One is significant changes in our workforces, and most of you who are in companies should probably have noticed this a lot. But when I was in there, I knew when the workforce started to diversify better, more often back in even in the 80s and the 90s. But in some ways, the diversities and the number of generations that are staying in the workforce, because some people stayed in longer and some new young people came in to this, and then how the mindsets have changed. That is how people feel differently about whether they will work in places that they're not happy and that they're not supported or they're not really used properly. That's one thing that starts to have a different mindset. I know what it was like when my father was there a long time ago. So he's like, three different generations away in some ways. But they used to say, yes, I'll do whatever you tell me, boss. And that is not the current workforce anymore. So that's some of the differences that we have to deal with. And it's not that it's somebody's bad or new, it's just a different set of people and a different set of mindsets. And I don't think our leaders have made a lot of shifts to work with that mix in our workforce. Number two, significant changes in all forms of technology. That is, digital machines, automations, AI, all the things that are happening is forming technology. And in the last couple of decades, I think it has been overwhelming how much we do to help the human system work better. But the technology stuff, parts of organizations are getting much more money. In the last few decades, I think there's been tons of change in technology. And one of the differences here, I think, is it's usually created by the people who understand technology, but the people like us and like HR people who should know how to make it work for the people aren't always included. And so that's one of the wonderful things that we had back some years ago when the people from England created socio-technical systems. And that's exactly what we live in today is socio-technical systems. But what makes it work well is when both technology and human people are all being brought together so that they're in fact both working well and both working better because of the technology, not being overwhelmed by the technology. Third, amounts, types, and speeds of all kinds of change. I'm sure if you work anywhere, you've been feeling it. And it's affecting organizations in so many ways. That is, there are digital, transformative, systemic, and some piecemeal projects. And there's a dozen different things going on in the bigger the organization is. And the problem is they're not often integrated. They're worked on as separate projects, and a lot of it never reaches the outcomes that they intended. All sectors of our environments have been changing also, all the parts that aren't your company, but all of the categories of the environment around you. And there's always been changes there, but they used to be a change in one or two categories at a time. We would know when there was something big technological changing or something in the government changing. And now we have changes in every category that futurists look at when they look at the environment. So it's government, economy, societies, social values, the climate work that everybody has been working on too. The environment is now very less stable. It's not the same as it was even back in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. Driving more change needs from outside, it comes from the outside and the inside now, and we really can't sit by and ignore any of those. And then a very disruptive worldwide health pandemic that we all know about. And that continues to change mindsets and affect many other aspects of our world. I know that after a year or two, they said, okay, the COVID's done. But that COVID has not stopped changing a lot of people's lives and where they're willing to work. And a lot of people never went back to work. They found something else to do. And so all of what I'm saying is these outside environments are also now things that we have to deal with somehow inside the organization. And that's why I call it continuous and fast and all kinds of changes happening at the same time. Now, our changed environment over the last couple of decades, there was just a couple more things. More change is starting to impact us systemically. They aren't single departments or single divisions anymore. If something is happening inside the organization, the interdependencies of a system are all connected in a lot of different ways, and we don't always know all the ways. And so it requires more and better systems thinking. I think many of us have learned systems thinking a long time ago, but I haven't seen people putting it into practice very well. And now I think we have to. I think that's the area we're heading into. And the interactions among the parts, the dependencies and the autonomies, is what we have to understand when we're doing changes. And more transformative changes are needed now than ever. So transformative means whole systems. It means larger parts of organizations. And a lot of people have done a lot of OD work for 80 years in single parts of organizations and working on pieces of the system. And I think that's why we don't always have the outcomes that we wish. But it's something that we can work with, because the more that we're working within the whole system, we begin to see where if I make a change in this piece of if I in this department, which has an important role in our business, if that one changes, you can assume that the others aren't going to need to change too. And I think that's the way this works. And then changes now in general are also more complex, overlapping each other, continuous, and disrupting what we know and disrupting how we are doing our work or running our business. So when we get into this kind of a world of change, we have to pay attention to everything in terms of how well is the strategy actually being played out in the environment and with our customers. And it's also whether or not the complexity is, are we looking at all the parts that have to change in order for us to stay successful? And I love to say this to people because I believe this anyway, is we never really manage change. And we have used that word forever. But when I think about how people change, it's people's behavior changes and systems processes change. And if both of those things aren't changing, then and we can't manage those changes ourselves as much as we can create the environment that allows the people to make the changes in their work system. And then the last one, I have something in the way here. Let's see. Yeah. So now I call it we need to get this thing out of here. Wait a minute. We navigate change. So for the last couple years when I've been teaching or writing, I've been trying to change, manage change to navigate change. Because navigate means it's not a straight line. It means we have to work our way among those different complexities, etc. So that's what I think is also part of our new world that we live in. And I'm excited by it, but I won't have enough time to do as much work in it as all of you. And I've gotten very, very serious about working with and sharing and everything I have to the next generation, because I think the next generation is going to be working in what I'm describing now. All right, let's see. This should go. So the issues we've had for a while, these are my opinions, of course, and but let me see if I can get these out of the text. Okay. Issues that have faced the field of OD. Since the early years, we've grown inclusively and did not integrate all the elements. That is, for the longest period of time in OD that I've watched, is that lots and lots of things were brought into OD. And it became so much after a while that a lot of it started to fall down into different groups of people, either around a method or around a model or around something. And they kept trying to simplify it some. But the reality is the world, like the managers who have to work with us or the people that we're trying to help, they don't always understand what really is OD because we've brought a lot of stuff in, but we haven't always integrated it into a professional level so that people could understand what is OD doing. And yes, there are a lot of methods we can use in OD that still work. Um, this has led to much confusion outside of the field and inside, as too many people define it differently. There's 48 different definitions I know of, and I think there's some being written even now. So we have a lot of people who say OD is something different. The field has fragmented with many disciplines leaving. We've actually had, from when I started, I'll tell you, the org design people left the OD field, and org design needs to stay in OD. You cannot create a change in an organization without thinking about how the organization is designed. And they left, and then we were coaching a long time ago before there wasn't even ICF. So now everybody's working on coaching as well, but it has its own group. And not too long ago, there was a whole new organization created on managing change. So that's also separated a lot of our people. Um, and we're forming new organizations and they're operating separately and training, coaching, transformative people left a long time ago because they used to see how people were doing a lot of OD work and they weren't touching the whole system. And some of those people left back in the 80s and so when they were trying to do transformational work. And so um, and so we have a valuable core essence, however. That's what I think we can live on. And that doesn't need to change, but needs for more people to understand what makes OD different. What are the core elements that we need to do something every time we're trying to change an organization? And I think we can do it different ways. I'm not going to tell people how to do it. I think there are a lot of methods. What I care about is are we hitting all of the core elements we need? Because I know the last couple projects that I had when I was working full-time consulting, the last two, I did try to change things that led in this direction. And I have to tell you, they were the best outcomes that I had in my career. So now I'm trying to pin them down a little bit and start to share them with everybody. The world we developed in was very different from where we are today. And that's just something we have to be thinking about. So for 5 minutes, I'd be interested to know if any of you have seen or experienced that has also created issues that are challenging OD as a strong, well-known professional field. What are the things that we've had to deal with or try to deal with to keep OD running? And And you can send a question into the chat, or if you want to, you can open your audio and and ask them as well. And I can stop the share for a minute so we can see people maybe. What are you experiencing about things that have struggled or challenged in OD work, in your work? Yes, I see one here, IO psychology as a field now, and I think it can bring new things together if we integrate it better. I have actually worked with a couple of OD people who got their degrees, and then when they went to work, they found out that the things that most of those people were doing in companies did not include the change part very much. It did change a lot about data, using data and figuring out exactly where they can improve something from the data side of it. And one of those people I've been working with lately is he said, all I want to do is I want to do OD work and I want to use what I learned. And he's trying and we're trying to work together to figure out how that can spread together. So that's really good. Yeah. And yeah, people in OD are not always included. That's true. So we have to make sure that we are thought of by the managers and by the leaders. These are the people we need in here, and that's where I think some of the not understanding OD has gotten in the way. HR technology, project management, and change management. Yeah, they have taken over a lot of stuff, and at least when I've been in a couple of places where I worked alongside of some of those people, what I realized is the work they were doing was, for the most part, after all the decisions are made, after all the changes are named, and then they started to do, and then a lot of these people are brought in. They're either brought in from the outside or from their own inside people. And then they're supposed to help people make the change happen. But they never had any influence from day one about what is the right kind of things to work on and what kind of change do they need. So let's see. Yeah, cultural difference. Yeah, I mean, see, here's the thing. One of the things that I think we always know is OD from day one back in the 50s, they were always concerned with how are the people being handled and how can the people make a difference in the change of that organization. But even though we say that, it's a whole system issue to make the change work. It's not just the people, which we seem to be good about, and a lot of other people are a little better about things like running the projects and stuff like that. But I think if we were to bring those two things together, that would really help. I mean, I was very disappointed when that other group just decided to form a separate thing, and they're kind of big now. They're bigger than some of the OD things are. And our OD professional groups, well, they're all over the world, but they're all small. It's like our ODN here and our ISOD here and the European one and the Asian one, and they're all doing well running programs for people, but they have very few voices. If you add them up, they don't have strong voices to influence all of this. Now there's so many good things here. I'll just see if I can see a couple more of these differently. Thank you for putting all these in, because um, performance improvement, yeah, performance improve. There's been a lot of concern about performance, obviously because of the pandemic and some other things. I think the reality is people have gotten, I always know that the leaders were always on top of the finance side, not so much on top of the human side. And the interesting question for me, and I've dealt with a lot of leaders and talked about this, is how you do things with the human system is what makes a difference in your performance and in your finances. That's exactly where they're connected. And uh, and there's been a lot of research actually that's been done when you've taken people and put them into a special team and worked with one leader who was the right kind of leader for them, and they would take the one I remember the most is they were way behind on getting things finished in time for their clients, and they took a week and they had these people work on a week. It was a holiday week, and they just did it, and they doubled what every other week had ever done because they knew how to do it, and they were supported, and they were led in a nice way, not a I'll tell you what to do and you do this and hurry up and do more. They were tired of that stuff. But that group in 1 week doubled the amount that they'd ever created in a week. And it's just a good example of it's how well we get the people working. And most of those people, as long as they're still with us, means that they're actually quite good. They know how to do the work. But there's other things that get in the way that make our performance numbers not look so good sometimes. And yes, that's a very interesting one. So
Professor, can I jump in?
yeah.
Because there's an interesting question I think you can address right away. It is from Ken. It's the last reply in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Ken from Japan.
Oh, from Ken. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Ken.
I'm curious what you mean by how OD does not apply well with Japanese culture. I am from Japan and I work in Japan US company.
Yeah. So, what's the question that he had here? Was he, or just some one of the experiences he's having that makes it
No,
difficult?
the last one. I am curious what you mean by how OD does not apply well.
How? Let's see. OD does not apply well with Japanese culture. I am from, yep, that's correct. Okay. So, here's the question. I worked mostly in the US, and I don't care where I went, the cultures were different in a lot of companies, but the culture in the country is different. And so, in a place like Japan and also in China, I think a lot of the country culture is also partly woven into the company cultures. And sometimes when you say OD is not doing it, then I would say we weren't using our OD correctly, because the idea is you walk into a system, you do not know how you're going to make a change until you learn something about the current state and exactly what they're trying to do and which culture and which values are driving them. So, whatever changes we're trying to make, if we go against them, we are going to get resistance. But if we learn about how to do those and work with the people in the system, not just us, just but somebody in the system, then they can help think about what is the best way that we could, for example, make this process works more efficiently, for example, or how could we save some money if we did this a different way, and how does it still fit within the values and culture of that particular system. And so what I learned in the second half of my career is I didn't care really what country they're in or what they're doing. You have to start from understanding exactly what is the current status and what has gotten them there, and build your design for change um, specifically for that culture and that system and those people. And I've learned how many different people there are and how many people are willing to do risky things and how many people just want to do little tiny things. And the question is that they always think that whatever they're doing, whatever method they use is going to work. And a lot of times it really doesn't. So if we all started out fresh every time we had a new change to look at, we have to figure out how we get the right data from the right people who understand, who work there, the people who understand it the best. That's what I would think. Yeah. So, okay, let's go. We be able to finish now. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Let me go to the next piece then. Last, I think it's the last piece. So I want to talk to you a little bit about where I am on this version. I've had three versions of this since 2000. I only wrote one of them, and I've been waiting to go through these a couple of times, and then I will try to write these up for people too. But let me start with this one. Where did I go with that? Oh, so our common purpose is what is our purpose? Do we all talk with all the different definitions and stuff that partly gets confusing, but here's what I think we're always trying to do. And I don't care what somebody asks for, but if you're the one who understands how to do change, you have to bring that into that system. So to do change, like just for example, it's not leaders telling what to do. That's not what makes change happen. So we care about organization effectiveness. So we want all of our changes to support ways to be more effective in whatever their organization strategy is and their vision is and everything else. Performance and developing capabilities are critical pieces. If we're not training people right, if we're not helping to shift to the right capabilities, then our work isn't really that helpful. Partnering with the system rather than doing the change for the system. So we're partnering it, and it makes a critical relationship element. In my opinion, whenever I could be in a partner relationship with leaders, things worked better. When all they thought we were was another pair of hands, and they know exactly what they wanted you to do for them, and they would pay you to do that. That's how they dealt with a lot of external consultants, at least. And they probably did the same with their internal OD people as well. Collaborating and guiding the system's people. That is, we're going to collaborate with them, we're going to guide with them, we're going to share everything we can to help them design how the change is going to work and what would work in their system. And not doing it for them, but telling and not telling them what to do. That is the wrong message. And sometimes that's one of the things that makes a big difference between OD people and people who have worked in management consulting for a long time, because they are truly hired to be the experts to tell the company what to do. Creating learning for the system, that is, what is unknown, what has not been experienced here, what is happening now that's different and counter to the current system. So we have to do some new learning. All of us need to be open to new learning in the 21st century. And I think that's what we don't allow enough data for sometimes, or we don't facilitate the right conversations among the people who are impacted by the change. And that'll come back a little bit later. And then leave systems and people in better status than they started. I always remember that because the first people that I learned from, they used to say, just whatever you do in there, make sure you're doing something better to help them. And then elevating humanity. And nowadays, because I think the technology has been overwhelming the human system and stuff, and it's been getting where all the money is gone, I think we have to elevate humanity again. We have to think about how do we help the culture deal with and take care of and include the right people in their system. That's one. And here we go. All right. The second one is systemic scope and depth. That is, this is back to where I say I think we need to think about systemic thinking a lot more and clearly scoping the change systems, meaning what parts of this business and what part of this organization need to be included so that they can understand the interdependencies among parts of the system, and then using intervening as our actions. That is, intervening, the word came out of systems thinking. And what it really means is to work to go between and to open up space. So intervening is doing very different kinds of things that will help the system be able to see where changes can work and where they can't in their cultures. Okay. Um, Systemic representative data-based assessing of what is the real current situation. And this is quite interesting because a long time ago, we took way too long to do our data collection. And I think we can't do that in this world because it's a lot faster of a world. But I do know that we have more ways to do it now. We have AI that could help us. We have things that can be done much faster now than we used to do. But we still have to do it in the right way. And that is if we don't get data from the people who know the best about how your work gets done, or they are impacted the most by changes. Those are the people who need to get their voice into the right room and be part of the people who help to think through, well, how in the world can we make a good change that will help us reach our vision and follow our strategy, or do we need to change the strategy maybe in this world? Those are the things that have to be talked about. And your use of yourself as the primary instrument of change. And of course, that's one of my loves. And I've spent the last 15 years doing both research and writing on clarifying what is use of self. Your use of self is the main instrument you have. And it means everything that takes place are taken in, seen and understood, decided by you of what to do, and use of your capabilities. They're all done by you. All that stuff comes through you. What you've learned, what you're able to practice, what you've improved your own behaviors around, that's what use of self does. And I've found that in this particular field, I think by the way, use of self is valuable to everybody, no matter what they're doing. But when we're doing this kind of work, we're constantly in between some conflicts. We're constantly helping people, guiding people so they can start to pick out the right kinds of actions to take that won't resist the people that they have in their system, but will actually help engage the people in the system. And using value-based thinking and how people work together and changes are designed and executed. So we think about our value-based world. In other words, OD from 1950s on has had a number of different versions of what are our values that we're working on. And ironically, we try to push our values sometimes into every client, and not every client has the same values necessarily. But what we have to do is we have to take values and put them operationalized in the way we work with the people, the way we help with the team that's going to work. It's how we operationalize it. So one of them is humanistic thinking and behaviors. What that means. So we can't make people do that. We can show what it looks like. We can act like it when we're working with them, and we can even teach some people about it. But that's an important value that we want to see. When people can't think that way, it's very hard for the people to end up feeling like they're being supported well or cared for. Impacted people's participation, their voice, their inputs, their roles, their decisions, their engagement. We need the people who get hit by the change to have a voice. Learning, developing, and growing for individuals and the system. I remember that was one of the things that I learned very, very early when I was studying this field, was how important it was that people have to learn something when they're going to change anything from A to B. Whatever it happens to be, there's some learning that has to be dealt in there. And individuals and in the system developing their potential. So that's the way we try to grow everybody during the process. Improving organizational effectiveness is, are things being done well? Are we saving money where we can? Are we overspending on some things that aren't working very well? That has to be thought about. Capabilities of the people and the organization. How do you build those capabilities? Sometimes in projects I did, we actually would set people aside for a day and we'd have some training on something. And sometimes we didn't do training because they understood what they needed to do. They just needed to practice it. And bringing the right people together for any changes. And that's the newest phrase that I've been dealing with is there is no specific right answer of who should be involved in helping design and figure out the right change. But I've started using this right people idea, meaning some of the people need to understand how to do change. So your best people who know how to do change are can be right people. The people whose departments are disrupted, the people who are impacted is very important to bring in. People who are going to be affected as soon as the change starts, but they're not affected yet. They need a voice and they need to be coming in. And the last time I did one, I actually had the chance to do this. And I started to deal with leaders and I said, instead of me just working with the leadership team, which the leader was asking me to do, I said, could I ask each of you to provide a name of a person who fits one of the two or three categories that I just mentioned? And you tell me who they are. I will give them an interview and I will build a team out of that. And so the leader was smart enough to say, okay, I'll give that a chance. And so good, what really came out so well of that is the people that were picked to work on the change, they've never worked on change before. I took a half a day and taught them enough to think about what kind of things can we do and what kind of change methods might we be able to use. And then when they did the work and they finally did a report and they brought it back to all the leadership team and they said, here's how I think we need to do this. And or no, here's what we found. Here's what we found when we did this. And it was really interesting. The CEO was there. He said, I got to tell you something. He says, I wished I didn't hear some of this stuff because it sounds like we have some work to do. But I really appreciate and value the quality of these people who did that work. And if you can notice anything about that, if I did too much of that, I could have just been pushed out of there and fired. And that's what happens with some consultants. So having the right people makes a difference. And then this one is the what's here. Here's the other simplification I'm trying to build in a little bit. The what's, the how's, the who's, the where's, and the when's is what we always need to be determined, designed, and executed. In every change situation, those things all have to be figured out. So part of it is done with data. Part of it is done with collaborative conversations among these right people because they learn from each other. And when that gets done, it has to happen in various forms and various timing. And we have to make sure that we get them all. So the what is, what are we going to change? The how is what methods we're going to use and how we're going to make it work. Who is which things have to be done first and which things might have to be done second. The where's is where do we start? Do we start in the middle, at the top, at the bottom? That's a decision to make. And the when's really builds out the whole pathway along the way. And you don't know the middle of the pathway when you're starting with the first step. But that's what you have to do to deal with this. And then I think, let's see here. Change involves both behavioral and organizational aspects. And I think that's also something that people do differently when they talk about, well, we made a good change or our change didn't work this time or whatever. I don't know what data, I don't know what outcomes they're really looking at. For me, I always look at, can we make the behavior changes that we need? And do we change parts of the organizational system that support that and make it work? So change involves both of these things. And I don't think we've changed anything when we're hardly getting either one of them. Again, back to our pal Father Lewin. Lewin's field theory is really important in a way because his field theory always says there's yourself in there, and there's your other people in any situation you're in, and then there's context, and it tells a lot about the behavior choices and the use of selves. So I've moved that also, I've brought that back into the use of self world so that in every situation, everything we're doing, just as a person and a role, we have ourselves there, we have others there, and we have a context. And when we are making decisions, what do I say? What do I do? What actions can I take? Then the choices are to be made that way. And then processes and technologies both help us create efficient, effective, and optimized social technical operations. So when we're building and rebuilding processes and when we're making technologies to intervene somewhere, then we have to look at both sides of that and optimize it. So I think we're getting close. This is real small here. So how to simplify, and this is a short version. This is how do we simplify design and exchange. So begin with the partnering relationships. I learned how many times I worked with leaders that never were in a partner leadership, and I know how hard the work was. And the difference was if we did the work up front with each other and we talked to each other and we thought about what each of us bring equal. They know the business, I know change. So we put together ways, and when we get that, it really makes a difference. So I would try very hard to start with that. Otherwise, if we're just listening to what they tell us to do, we're 3 months down the road and we've already created more resistance because some of the people were left out. Start with representative database assessments and discoveries. So we got to figure out a better way to collect data, to speed up some of the data, and to get different forms of data from different people in the system. We need some qualitative data, we need some quantitative data. It isn't just metrics anymore. That doesn't give us the answers. From data and leaders thinking, we can form an initial change team of the right people to participate in the understanding of the current state, the early sense of resistance and support. Where do we find support? Where do we see resistance? Change systemic values, that is, change, build boundaries around where the change is going to happen, name the change purpose, name the change design, make decisions, processes, and modifications. Some of the right people also need to be best skilled for change, experienced, or dialogically in the system. I'm sorry, dialogue in the system. People that are from the top, middle, and bottom in different ways. We want those voices too, because I can't tell you how many times whatever you hear from all the leaders and whatever you hear from the front line people, there's a lot of difference in there, and we need to have that happen. And we communicate and share with the whole system. That is, we tell them the whys we're doing it and the whats as soon as possible, the whole system. And then the hows as they're determined, the whole system, to inform all and open space for others to provide impacts on the core team and continue with regular updates. And continue the pathway and use iterative cycles and continue to gather updated data along the way. This is where I was hoping that small teams and AI might be able to be raising about every quarter, they could be raising new data from all the different parts. I think that would speed up any changes that we might need to make along the pathway. And always support people, reward them, honor them, speak about their good work. The people doing the change work, and keep senior leadership completely involved and updated, as well as all the impacted and effective people in and outside of the organization. So part of this is we can't just let this work happen. I think change work is one of the hardest things. that we need to have done. And this is kind of things where we start to have to be really supportive of people who do this kind of work. So thank you so much for hearing my version right now of where we stand. And I'll be happy to take anything else that people want to talk about.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Really engaging. We have two questions. I will read the first one, but I
Okay.
suggest that you read the second one in the Q&A session because it's a very long.
Uh,
Yes, and to understand it in context, it would be better that you read it. But the first one is, how do you incorporate these values of disciplines when competing with management consultants who position themselves as expert directly to clients?
right. Well, I was lucky. I worked with one of the management consulting places one time, and I learned a lot about what they do. And I'll tell you two things. I think one is they have great experience, and they do that well. But that means that they already have the answers that they are giving to people because they've already built their theories and their models and their everything else. And the problem is it doesn't allow for the flexibility. And I've been in 100 different companies in my life, and I can tell you that I don't think there was anything I would be able to do exactly the same across any of them. And that's what's different when you walk in and say, well, I'm not sure how we're going to do it here yet. We're going to learn that, and then we're going to design it. Um, and And when you start to implement the work, that's when you learn how people react to it. That's when you can get new data all of a sudden, like, oh, I thought this was going to be really a good idea, but now it doesn't feel right. So you have to keep that door open in the front end in order to make sure you end up doing the change in a different way. And I know when I talk to the people there, I said many times, I said, well, what happens if whatever big report you give and all that stuff, and what happens if that doesn't seem to work for them, or they don't know how to make it happen? It's the how part. This isn't the what again. They're giving them the what, but they don't know the how. And I think that's exactly what's happened, because I've heard recently from a lot of places where people who have been paying millions of dollars to management consultants, they've been unhappy with some of the things they got, and they've started to really cut back on what they will pay them and stuff. And I've seen even layoffs happening in a couple of the management things. Now, I think there's times for them to do it, and that is when the company has no ability to take care of it and they say, please do this for us. The problem is that doesn't stick with people. It's somebody else is telling them what they need to do. And if they don't know how to do it, it doesn't work. So to me, that becomes the big difference. And I guess if I was president of a company, first of all, I probably wouldn't choose that up front, because I already know it's better to kind of get your own data and get the people involved. But if you're in a hurry and you're concerned and you don't have any good answers, that's why they go to those management consultants all the time, because they'll get answers. They'll get answers for sure. And the question is, when I started out, I went to work with a guy who was 25 years older than me. He was a management consultant and he had a small business, and that's the first place that I worked in. And he didn't work in OD, but I'll tell you one thing, I learned a ton from him about how good of a consultant he was dealing with leaders. So I learned a lot from him. And what he and I did 3 times was he got clients after the management consulting people left them with their report, and they didn't know what to do. And we came in and helped them try to implement what they got from the management consultant people. And the difference was we did it by bringing more people involved so that they were actually seeing what it was and understanding how they can do it. So that's just one example of how it happens. But yeah, I think it's better where we're more, what the word that's important is, we're more participative. We bring more people in than what other consultants tend to do. That's what happens, I think. And where's the other you want me to look at?
Thank you, Dave. It is in the Q&A,
Where's the Q&A?
or do you want me to read it?
Wait a second.
Yeah.
I don't see Q&A. Yeah, so just tell me about it. Tell me about
Okay, I'll just read it. Dear Dave, I hear a lot of right and wrong, they and us, we and them, some of us and many of them, expert and not expert, telling and not telling. Such hard boundaries are biased and seem reflective of OD and its birth in the USA,
it.
wild and male, a country known of advancement as well as righting and wronging the
Hmm.
rest of the world and being hypocritical.
Hmm.
What OD and USA seems to forget that USA is a newborn baby 200 years compared to vast majorities of the rest of the world 100 to 1000 years, China, Japan, India. I am curious, here's the question. I am curious of your views about the missing humility and strong sense of arrogance of USA and OD in creating such in-groups, out-groups dynamics.
In groups, out groups.
Yes.
So who becomes the out groups? We don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and well, I'm thinking that I mean, I don't think of things as in groups and out groups. If you're speaking about the idea of pulling the right people together to form the change team, that is something where I think is you are building a specifically in group whose work is going to be about the change while other people are still running the business. That's all. They're not out because they're going to be communicating with them all the time. But if you have people, if people feel that way, if you're actually making things done so where some people feel like they're out and some people they're in, I believe that we're probably making a mistake in some way if that's how people are interpreting. Because the difference between the people who have to do the change work is different from the people who have to keep the business running. And I think we need both all the time. What I just wanted to do is improve the people that we put into the change team, because I know sometimes I had to do it around the leader who would want to pick the people and stuff. And I would realize in the end that they didn't know some of the data, or they didn't let us collect the extra data from the rest of the organization. And that's to me where the mistake started. So yeah, I mean, if your value is unity, humanity, part of it means who needs to be included, who will care the most, who will bring the most. Those are all important, but you can't have everybody stop their job while you have to do change. And in fact, that's why they keep using outside people, because they want to keep everybody in their job. But the problem is the people inside don't own it if they've never created it. And I think that's where the one of the things happens a lot, because we have 18 books or so on resistance. And what's really interesting is the first three steps we do in any change creates part of the resistance because we've already left people out. And that's where a lot of the resistance comes from. So, so yeah, I mean, I've studied resistance and I've taught resistance, and I know there's always going to be some, but I do think we are responsible for how we start things that keeps people engaged versus saying, oh no, I don't like this. This is going to ruin my department. So now I'm a resistor. So, and that's why readiness is a big word. A lot of people use readiness now. Do they know how ready the organization is to make changes? Well, you can't tell that until you're talking to people in the system. If you talk to the people in the system and they say, yeah, this will help me if we can do that. And if we can do that, yeah, I think this will help these other people. Now we have a lot of supporters. If we don't, we end up with people who complain, and they'll tell you what's wrong with it. They'll tell you it's not good. So, anyway, I mean, I don't want to run away from any of those. I want to help them. I mean, when I'm looking at the right report at the right people, I always ask people, I say, who is most likely to be supportive and who is most likely to have resistance? And somebody in that system will tell me. They'll always tell me. And I said, well, let's get one of those people into the team because it helps to have people together when they're talking. So, and that's where our facilitation side of everything is always important because we work in groups a lot, we work in teams a lot, and so in a way, you know, our facilitation is also an important skill that I think we need in OD, and I think everybody's been taught that pretty much along the way. But because we work in groups, facilitation is an important word. So, yep. So,
So, yes, thank you. Thank you for answering the questions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, on behalf of our OD&C, so Organization Development and Change, Workforce Education and Development Program. We hope you've enjoyed today's session. If we did not address your question, please reach out to us by email or just email the presenter directly. For further webinars, we would like to hear from your feedback on today's webinar. Please take time to fill out the survey in the chat box or scanning the QR code. Professor, can you go to the next slide where we have our QR code,
yep,
please?
yep.
Yeah, thank you. Our next webinar, the Skill Building Sandbox, where experiential learning meets real world practice, will be presented by Dr. Eileen Saballero and Farhan Sadiq on December 12th, 2025. That's also our last webinar for this year. So it will be at noon, and registration for all our events is free and can be found on our website. You can also find us on our social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Have a good day and a good night. And for our guests from around the world, see you. Bye.